Hey Emily, so thrilled to continue on with the Step Up series with you. How are you feeling about talking about all things officer transitions today?
I am super excited. I feel like it's something that gets skipped over a lot of times.
Yeah.
Like we're not equipping our officers as fully as we could be. So super excited to chat all the things.
Yeah, if you're an outgoing officer listening, which we hope you are, I want you to think for a second about your officer transition, right? How did you feel going into it? Like, how much do you feel like you knew about the position going into it? And how many questions did you have leaving it, right? I think uh what officer transitions looks like the time and how we spend it is typically I feel like I don't know, Emily, I'd love to hear what a lot of your chapters do. It normally is like a 4 hour chunk where we go through expectations of being a leader in this organization. We talk about maybe like some goals that were met or unmet, and then we like break off into pairs and just talk one on one, and you like get access to the Google Drive or get handed the binder, and then what happens to the outgoing officer? It's like, all right, that was fun. What's next? I don't know. What's been your experience when you are support chapters with officer transitions?
Yeah, definitely. In my own chapter experience, it was kind of like an on your own situation. So I want to like give credit to everyone that has been in that situation because it is a lot of chapters tend to skip over officer transitions, which is really unfortunate. Through Alpha Zeta Delta's like headquarters, we have some sources on officer transition. So that's what I've been using with the chapters that I've worked with as a traveling team member. And you do some just kind of like you said, maybe some team building, some debriefing, like what were goals and what did we achieve this semester. And then yeah, pairing off and being sure to cover all the bases with your new officer and any advisors that she might have that want to stop by. So
Yeah, that's a good synopsis. I'm assuming that's what most of our listeners are like used to, or that's like the experience that they had. I want us to think like even before elections, for many of you hopefully listening to this before elections, I want you to know that you don't have to start preparing for officer transitions after elections. If anything, that's a process that could have started long before you even consider who is going to be next, right? But if you're just listening, obviously you're just listening to this now. If you're just thinking about this now, no, that's okay. But as your position starts to slow down approaching elections, as most do, I would just challenge you to like spend the same amount of time that you had been spending on whatever your peak time was. If it was like preparing for your philanthropy week, or if it was preparing for recruitment, or the budget to be proposed for the new fiscal year, whatever that is, whenever you're putting in a lot of work, put that same amount of intention and energy into reflecting on what you've accomplished, what you learned through your role, and what tools would set the next person up for success. Because so often I feel like we get to the end of our term and we're like, I don't know, I just learned how to do all this stuff and it became second nature. That is not an effective officer transition. That is not how you tell someone how to do your job. So, Emily, what do you think? What are some good tools to get started in reflecting on what you've accomplished to be able to effectively communicate that to your successor in a couple weeks?
yeah, definitely. As we're getting to the end of the term, obviously we'd like to see this start at the beginning of the term where you're starting to keep track of what all you are doing in your position, whether
Yeah.
that's for the officer transition or you just want to put it on your resume because like resume building is important too.
Yeah.
Um, but now that we're towards the end, I think looking back and maybe not calculating out. I'm a very logistical person, so that's where that language comes in. But
Yeah.
thinking about like how much money did you raise if you were in philanthropy? How many PNs did you recruit, or how many workshops did you host as recruitment vice president? Thinking back to what you do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and you've probably done a lot. Like you should be really, really proud of yourself. So pat yourself on the back because there's a lot more behind the scenes stuff too that you've probably been handling, like emails, reports for your national organization, reports to your university, all the paperwork that goes into running a small business that is a chapter. So definitely just thinking back through your weeks and your months and not discounting the small things that you've done as well.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think obviously it's really easy for your position to know like what the big things are, right? Like if you are the vice president of recruitment, it is like probably continuous open bidding one semester and primary recruitment the other semester. But that means that there's preparation that goes into either on the opposite months, right? And so like thinking through not just those events, but like the process of planning for each, when you need to circle in vendors or when reports are due in preparation for those things, right? Like you might have come up with a timeline that works really well for you that would be really helpful to pass along. So even thinking about some of those little things and when you did them, some of the more like consistent parts of your job, thinking about the frequency with which you did them, like emails, like what was your um what was your process for checking email, responding to email? Did you have office hours? Did that work? Did that not work? If you work one-on-one with members, where did you find that works well? How did you find communicating works well? If you actively use a committee, how did you communicate with them? Did you create any specific roles for them to operate in? Maybe there's some things that you wish you would have had more time to do or think about, like reflecting on those things and writing them down to say, I didn't have time to do this, or I wanted to build in more opportunities for chapter members to be involved in this area of the chapter. All of those things, I think, play a big role in creating this greater picture of what you do with more clarity and detail to ensure that when that's communicated, it's not just giving someone the password to the Google Drive, but communicating like when you use different elements of these resources, maybe things that were passed down to you that you didn't use, things that you created that you would encourage using. The details and the frequency and the timelines matter a lot. And if those aren't things you documented, you have time. Like do that now. Because I think the other thing about preparing for officer transitions before elections, if you are in a chapter that has opportunities to talk about like do pro con pro throughout the election process, then you have like better grounds to stand on even with familiarity of what you've accomplished instead of talking just off memory. You've now like documented what you've done and can make strong pros or cons for candidates based on like the scope of work that you have personally reflected on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think taking your experience of working on, for instance, if you were an executive committee member or executive board member, taking the experience of working on a team and being like, okay, it's not just you that's managing your committee. You are also part of this larger team who has their whole thing going on. But like you all have to work together and just kind of like trying to explain that dynamic of
Yeah.
leading others while being led by your sisters at the same time.
Yeah, it's a hard dynamic for sure. Um so I think what we've just described kind of boils down into what her sorority journey believes is effective method for officer transitions, and that's like a reflect, celebrate, and cast vision model. So like our vision for effective officer transitions is that you would take all of this reflection, all this time that you've looked back on what's been accomplished, and kind of like cipher it into two categories. And I think a lot of that can happen for your position individually, but can also happen for the council or the chapter at large, getting to see how specific objectives that your position had played into like bigger goals being accomplished for the chapter or the community at large, right? And ensuring that part of your officer transition is actually celebrating those things, is like bringing to light what was accomplished to really increase your pride and your resume, right? Like put it on your resume. But also like celebrate with ultimately with your new officers of what was accomplished, what they were able to witness. But then also another bucket of like casting vision, like not to belabor things that weren't done or weren't done as well as they could have been, but instead to turn that into a growth mindset of almost like a starting plan that that new officer can take and run with and say like, okay, like these are some things I want to make sure to hit again, but now I have another list of things that weren't able to be accomplished or weren't able to be streamlined as effectively as possible. How do I use that list to then build out some goals for the next year? And so her sorority journey actually has a virtual officer transition workshop that is self-paced, is self-guided. It's available through our website. That is available to you if you'd like some support in walking through that process of reflection, celebrate and cast vision, with worksheets for both the outgoing officer and the incoming officer, that we will make sure to link in the show notes and hope that will guide you as you embark on a successful transition of leadership this year.
Great. I'm so excited for everyone to see this resource and be able to start thinking and reflecting on their journey as a leader so far, and maybe even prepare themselves for their next leadership position. So always looking up.
Totally. There's always that caveat too of anyone who's listening might be an outgoing leader and an aspiring leader, right? There might be some of you who are like, I just finished my year as like Emily, Vice President of Philanthropy, but I want to see what's next, right? I'm running for another position. If you're in that boat, or if you have friends who are aspiring leaders, make sure to come back next week for our aspiring leader episodes to really help you put your best foot forward throughout the elections process and also show up gracefully as a sister, regardless of the outcome. And with that, we will see you next week.
Thanks. Bye.